And thank you for joining us for this week's edition of It's Your City. I'm Cortney Bloomer, and we're here at the Brewery Arts Center with this week's guest, Sheriff Kenny Furlong. Hi, Sheriff Furlong.
How you doing, Courtney?
Thanks for being here with us this week.
I appreciate this.
Lots going on in Carson City,
Really
in the Sheriff's Department. I know that there are a few things going on right now that are of real interest to the community. There are some phone scams happening in our town.
You know, the phone scams are from one side of it is kind of interesting and funny because the most frequent one that's hitting a lot of our phones throughout the entire region is you're going to be arrested if you don't come down and pay this or do that. Well, really, when was the cops that nice to call you up and say you're about to be arrested?
Right.
They usually come knocking on the door. So the phone scams, you know, if it's unexpected, if you don't know what's coming, if it's a relative in a foreign country, these are all signals that they're scams, and it's just not correct. And so we constantly want to reinform everybody. Money does not come for free, and if you have an award that's being presented to you, you don't have to put money up front. That's a solid signal. It's a scam.
Absolutely. No one is trapped in Nigeria and a prince that needs your help.
No. And very often they target the senior population for those types of things. You have a grandson who's been in jail up in Canada and needs his bail.
Right. And some of these scams kind of almost look legitimate because I know there's one that's been going around that people are saying that they're the IRS.
They've hit the IRS, they've hit the courts, you haven't paid a debt, even utility companies, your power, and this is one that targets businesses. Your power is about to be shut off because you haven't made payment. We're going to shut it off today, unless you make this payment right now. These are all scams, and as we put it out into our public information arenas, they adjust to that. These scam artists adjust to it.
Right, they can also hear us talking right now.
They can hear us talking right now. They're watching us on TV, and they're going, okay, well, we'll just do this little thing. We don't want people falling prey to it. So much money is lost from the goodness of someone's heart, and it's just wrong.
So what can people do if they're a victim of one of these scams, or even if they don't go along with the scam, but if they're called by someone who's trying to perpetrate a scam? How can they report that to you, to your department?
It's very simple to report it. You just call our dispatch center so that we can be informed when these things are taking place, because they do kind of cycle through and get the information out to our entire region, not just here in Carson City, because our telephones are just, we don't know the difference what town you're in. And by the way, that is a significant feature that people should be aware of. If you have caller ID, that caller ID signal, that telephone number or that identification is not necessarily true. Some of the scams that we have had, they use a thing called spoofing through the internet, and they can change that number. So it's not always that I've got the number so you can go catch them, police officer, and that's not always true.
But go ahead and report it just in case.
Please report it. Contact our dispatch center so that we can make sure.
And let's tell everybody the number for the dispatch center.
The dispatch center is 887-2014, and they will take care of you. If you forget the number, remember it's 887-2014 or 911. It's the same operator, and they'd be happy to get the information for you.
Okay, fantastic. So be aware of those phone scams and don't fall victim to those.
Please do not fall victim to those, no matter how much they pressure you.
Absolutely. Another thing that I'm really excited about right now is that it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month here in Carson City. That's an issue that's really important to me. And I know that it's something that your department also takes very seriously.
Absolutely, and I'm glad it's important to you because it's as important to me. I look at what is going on in our community all the time, and one of the issues that really drives our, let's call it the crime rate here in town, is simple assaultive behavior. Well, as an example of what you and I are talking about right now, just this week I received my report of what occurred over the last week, and of the assaultive behaviors that are taking place. The preponderance of them are on the domestic side, which means that these incidents are taking place in our homes, and we really have to pay attention to that and give our folks information on how they can avoid that type. Very often alcohol is involved, drugs are involved, and they blow up horribly, as we saw just in this past week.
Right,
With
we
a
had
young
the
lady.
incident with the pregnant young lady and her boyfriend or male.
Horrible incident that just was a disaster at a home. And so we have to pay attention to those shortcomings. It's never okay to touch the other person. It's never okay. And when emotions are getting that high, that's your first signal that I need to seek outside assistance. There are counseling services all over this community, especially when it comes to family, for whatever those stressors that are causing the problem. Maybe it's financial, maybe it's marital, maybe it's alcohol. All of these, there are plenty of services. You just need to reach out, and I think a lot of people fail to see that.
And certainly groups like Advocates to End Domestic Violence, the folks at Fish can make referrals for folks, so there's plenty of places that people can go to reach out.
There are plenty of places. The Ron Wood Family Resource Center is one of the bigger ones here in town. They're coming up on their celebrations here in about a month. There are plenty of resources. The challenge is knowing where to go.
Right.
And I think that if you reach out to any of these government agencies, the Sheriff's Department, Health Department, they're going to direct you towards these nonprofits that have that information readily available and can just hand it over to you. And then you can make the referral call on your own in some cases in privacy and avoid the embarrassment.
Right, and this isn't just intimate partner violence. This is also violence against kids sometimes in the home, against elderly folks who might be in the home. What advice do you have for residents of Carson City who might be concerned, might want to report violence or abuse and aren't sure what to do about that?
You know, when you're not sure, probably the best thing to do is to get an officer involved. Contact the dispatch center again, and if you're ever unsure, just dial 911 so that we can get an officer out to make an initial assessment. Is there really a problem? And where is the core of that problem? Sometimes they're perceived. And in fact, I will tell you this, when it comes to aging, a lot of the problems that we have is because of the love that the two people share for one another. And outside assistance is absolutely critical. But on the topic of domestic violence, folks, I tell you what, alcohol.
Really causes a lot of problems, altered perceptions of what's going on.
You know, it reduces those mechanisms that we all have that we don't want to do something. You throw alcohol on board, and now that goes to the back of the mind, and they go ahead and do it. And it is one of the most severe crimes that can occur, because it's not only physically, in many cases, it's long-term emotional scars
abuse
that will never, ever go away.
So if you see something, say something.
Report it.
And not just with violence, but any kind of crimes.
With any kind of crime. And I would like to touch on that for a moment, because that is important. And we usually do, but I always like to provide the reminder. You folks that are watching, you know what's in your neighborhood, you know the cars, you know the people. A police car can drive right on through your neighborhood and never see anything out of the norm, while you, walking out the front door of your residence, your home, you're headed to work, you look both ways and you go, you know, I've never seen that car before. Those are the types of calls for service that we love at the Sheriff's Department. There's something suspicious. Something just doesn't look right. This person standing on the corner, I don't know who that is. Can you just we love going to those types of calls because they're preventative in nature, and they can safeguard a neighborhood from so many different types of crimes.
Right, drugs and
drugs, theft,
violence,
everything, you name it. And the irony here in Carson City is, if you feel at all hesitant, most of our residents do not. That's one of the top 10 things that we do every year, is those suspicious things that we see in our neighborhood. That's what keeps our community safe.
It is, and a lot of things go on in Carson City that we know are happening that we need the public's help with. There was the burglary ring
Yes.
recently that was going on.
You know, that we had a burglary ring, and the core, and I do compliment all of the officers. I absolutely do. 3 agencies worked together. I got to sit in an operations room for an entire week. 3 agencies worked fantastic. But what solved the case was the public coming forward, having identifiers to their property, being able to say this thing is mine, and those are the things that we recognize. We need your help. We need your assistance. We'll take the ball from there, but give us just that little bit of information.
Right. And part of that, too, is building up these positive relationships between your officers and members of our community here. I know across the country right now, that's not going so well.
It's not.
There are nationwide, there's kind of a negative perception of law enforcement right now due to a number of incidences that have happened. Ferguson, the incident last week in South Carolina. How is the Carson City Sheriff's Department working to make sure that something like that doesn't happen in our community?
Well, it's a really good point, because what has taken place, let's call it over the last year, I believe has set back relationships between the community and its public safety entities 10 years. We've got to have strong relationships in order to make progress. And it just seems like over this last year, it's just been a constant barrage of poor decisions being made. And although we don't seem to have a lot of that right here, any one instance anywhere in this country reflects on all of these professionals. And so we have to continuously do the same thing that we have been doing for the last 10 years here in Carson City, is reaching out into the public. We do as a matter of fact, we have one coming up, our Cops and Kids Spaghetti Dinner, hosted at the Fandango every year for the last 10 years. These are our attempts to reach out and make those relationships. Okay. Beyond that, folks like me, those people sitting in those chairs, need to pay attention and really, really, truly listen to what's causing these problems wherever they occur. And do you have strong policies and practices in place within your own organization that are going to hold people, number one, accountable, and number two, that provide them with the training and experience to react better than what we are seeing?
Absolutely. And making sure that those reactions are appropriate, and making sure that not just when an emergency happens, but on a daily basis, taking those opportunities to interact with people in a positive way, responding to those calls that you were talking about when someone see something suspicious in their neighborhood, and just getting a chance to be out there and be visible and build partnerships with our neighborhoods.
Yeah, and it is a great challenge, because as you were saying that, I'm thinking in my mind, we don't always get to go to the birthday party.
Right.
Okay, so there is stress when we arrive at the scene of a call, of whatever type it is. Or I stop you because one of the neighbors said you're standing on the corner and they don't know who you are. There is some stress involved, and we recognize that the uniform is a part of that stress. It's that professional demeanor that can de-escalate, and we are training all of our officers on those types of activities. When it comes to mental health, we call it crisis intervention. Well, that crisis intervention technique can apply to everything, all the way down to me just having a casual conversation or writing you a ticket for speeding. It's us recognizing how to de-escalate a scenario, and we've seen that so often here in town, and I'm very proud of our officers of the efforts that they've taken to de-escalate and de-escalate and de-escalate. Unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't happen that way, and in many cases they end tragically.
Now, when you were talking just now, you mentioned mental health. That's a big issue here in the entire state of Nevada, having access to mental health care. Your department has pioneered a really fantastic jail diversion program for individuals who have mental health. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, over the years, we've recognized that our jails are packing up on a revolving basis with mental health patients. In other words, maybe they committed a crime, maybe that's at the surface level. But if you look down below it, it's not the crime that's the problem, it's the health of the person. And so over the past several years, we've elevated our attention to that. Our psychologists in the jail, our counseling services that are in the jail, our medical doctor that's in the jail, they're all concentrating on these efforts to isolate those cases, most of it on a voluntary basis. I do appreciate that, but isolate those cases so that we can reduce the probability that they will return to jail and create a streamlined service when they do exit, so that they are received by somebody on the outside. Today, as we've expanded that approach, we now have some clinicians that are out there riding in our patrol cars with us and going out and handling some of our calls for service with us.
So you actually have mental health professionals on board.
On board.
So at the moment of response.
At the moment of response. And the feedback has just been phenomenal from the public where they have had to engage. Because we're back to this. This is intimidating, especially when there's mental health factors on board. And we're trying to de-escalate that and get services. So I see that expanding in our upcoming years, because maintenance of mental health care is a priority. When you provide adequate maintenance there, you hope to reduce those crisis events, and that's what we are targeting.
And do you see that that's happening? How are the call volumes changing? How are the kinds of cases that you deal with changing?
Well, that's a really good question. As we have done this for the last several years, what's happened? And I can tell you that in our conferences and our conversations, and what's hitting the top of the table is, wow, we seem to be overwhelmed with the volume. And that's not just here in Carson, that's all the way throughout this region. And why is this happening? Well, I'm cautious about trying to answer something too quickly. If we go out into the streets and we look for everybody who's wearing these kind of pants and the white shirt and has short hair, we might find that there's more in the town than we think. Okay, so we're applying services in a very good way to a group of the population, and I think that we may be discovering that there are more in need than we daily anticipated in the past. So that can be a major factor, and if there's truth to that, then we're on the right track.
So you think that this is just an artifact of more people are calling, more people are receiving services, not that that our community is becoming more dangerous, or that we have more crime?
I'm beginning to lean that way. If you provide a service out there, people will come to it. They become aware of it. They become knowledgeable. We have more entities that are working more closely together today. Used to be in the past, your organization is not going to communicate what you're doing over to our organization, who's not communicating over to here. But part of this crisis that we're going through response is to bring these organizations closer together. Now we're starting to communicate to one another, and hopefully taking preventative steps by, and this is our future response, can we get volunteers that are going to help us do that low-level maintenance? There are no problems, but we just want to stop by and check on Johnny and make sure everything's still going as planned. He's still seeing his counselors and everything is working. We don't want people falling off the chart.
Right. We don't want to lose people and have them be repeat offenders.
Yes.
The frequent flyers in the jail.
What shocked me, and we went through this with the meth epidemic. Meth epidemic touched everybody. It crossed every line that there was. What shocked me is we were building the acknowledgement and better programs to respond to the mental health side of what goes on in our community. Mental health touches everybody as well. We all know somebody who could use a little bit of help, and even if we were to roll this tape back and talk about domestic violence again, what kind of a person beats on another? There are issues that need to be treated. And we have the ability here in this town. We have it. We have every resource that you can imagine. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting people in touch with that resource. And all of our programs are designed to do that.
Well, we certainly appreciate all the work that the Sheriff's Office has been doing to reach out to the people in need in our community, to keep us safe. You guys are doing a great job out there in our city, and we thank you for joining with us today for
I appreciate it very,
for It's
very
Your City.
much.
Thanks for stopping by. Do you have anything else you want to mention before we wrap up?
No, I look forward to coming back again. I think that these are absolutely important. The best communities across our country are those that communicate all of the messages to everybody, informed.
Well, thanks for being here with us
you.
again. And thanks everyone else for joining us for this week's edition of It's Your City. We'll see you again next week.